All right, so I saw the numbers kind of come to a slow crawl as people are getting in, and folks are welcome to join throughout the call. But I just wanted to welcome everyone. Happy Tuesday. Can you believe it's the last day of January? Because I 100% cannot. But happy early Black History Month to all who celebrate and all who commemorate the month. So welcome to an amazing panel, an amazing webinar we have planned for you today on self-managed abortion and criminalization 101. This event is organized by the Center for Gender and Sexuality Law, whose mission is to formulate new approaches to complex issues facing gender and sexual justice movements. And it's also being co-sponsored by Columbia Law School's chapter of If, When, How, as well as If, When, How National, who you will hear from in just a few minutes. And this event is also being co-sponsored by the Reproductive Justice the Reproductive Justice Collective New York, and Empowering Women of Color, which is another Columbia Law School student-run organization. And I just want to quickly introduce you all to the speakers and let them jump into the presentation. So first up, I want to introduce Rebecca Wang, who uses she and her pronouns. And Rebecca is the If, When, How's legal support counsel, and in her role, she provides technical assistance around self-managed abortion and young people's access to abortion to advocates in the reproductive justice, rights, and health movements. She also provides support for the work of the litigation and policy team at If, When, How. Rebecca comes to this work after completing a year with the If, When, How Reproductive Justice Fellowship Program, where she was placed with Positive Women's Network USA in Oakland. And she is a graduate from the University of Iowa's College of Law and is licensed to practice in the state of California. So welcome, Rebecca. And next we have Catherine Gucciardo. Did I get that right? Kind of?
Close, Gucciardo.
Okay, Gucciardo, who also uses she and her pronouns. And Catherine is If, When, How's helpline counsel. In her role, Catherine supports the reproductive legal helpline by helping people understand the laws around various reproductive experiences, including self-managed abortion, youth access, and birth justice. Prior to joining If, When, How, Catherine was a staff attorney in the housing unit at the Bronx Legal Services, where she provided legal assistance to tenants facing eviction and housing court. She began her career as a family defense attorney at Brooklyn Defender Services, where she represented parents facing allegations of abuse or neglect and helped reunite them with their families free of state intervention. Catherine received her JD from Penn State Law and is licensed to practice in the state of New York. So welcome to you, Catherine. And with that, I will just pass it on over. And if folks want to ask questions throughout, please feel free to use the Q&A and drop your questions in there, and we will make sure that the presenters are able to answer those. And with that, I pass it to If, When, How.
Hi, everyone. I hope you're all doing well today. We're excited to do this presentation for all of you. So to start our presentation, we'll start with why one of our key priorities is ending the criminalization of people who self-manage their abortions. And we'll spend some time clarifying what we mean by self-managed abortion, and then share what we know about criminalization in the US. And finally, we'll share some practical tips on how to share abortion information, as well as highlight some resources that we offer at If, When, How. And we'll open up the floor for any questions that you might have for us at the end. So first, a little bit about our organization for anyone who hasn't heard of us before. If, When, How is a national multiracial nonprofit that works to transform the legal system to ensure that everyone has the rights and resources that they need to determine if, when, and how to become pregnant, to give birth and form a family. And we apply a range of strategies to challenge reproductive oppression, from defending people in court and challenging unconstitutional laws, to advocating for policy changes that expand people's rights, to providing legal information to abortion seekers and activists who are concerned that they might be criminalized, and also using research to envision new ways to advocate for reproductive justice. We do have our origins in student organizing to ensure that reproductive justice values live on in law school campuses. And we support a vibrant network of attorneys to give their time and use their talents in service of reproductive justice throughout their careers as well. So why is decriminalizing self-managed abortion one of our top priorities? In the last decade, we've seen appalling misuses of the criminal legal system levied against people for ending their pregnancies, and unsurprisingly, it is deployed primarily against people of color and people living in poverty. Meanwhile, in recent years, more people have become interested in self-managed abortion, and you can see on the map. We know that as the criminalization of self-managed abortion continues in this country, many more people will face the risk of being investigated, arrested, and imprisoned in the years to come. And this makes the need to decriminalize and the need to support people who self-manage even more important than it has been before. So, of course, when talking about why we do this work and why this work has been more urgent in the recent years, we have to acknowledge that Roe v. Wade was recently overturned. And accordingly, there's a resurgence in talk about what it means in to live in a post-Roe world. But as an organization that works around self-managed abortion specifically, we know that for many people, the right to an abortion has only existed in the abstract. For many people, clinical abortion access has not actually been possible, or sometimes is not preferred. People have been self-managing abortion long before there were laws around abortion, and people will continue to self-manage their abortions regardless of what the law says. So in that sense, people have already been living in a post-Roe world. So now we'd like to take the temperature of the room. Before we get into any definitions, we have a quick polling exercise that we would like to do just to get a sense of where everybody is. We have some agree or disagree questions, and you to respond through the poll. There are no wrong answers, no judgment, and we're not going to ask anyone to talk about their answers. So it's just based off of the questions, select what your choice is. The first question is, pregnant people know what is best for their own bodies. I see some answers coming in. Second question, self-managed abortion is an option of last resort. The third, people can make accurate self-assessments of when they need to seek medical help. And the final question, people who order abortion pills online should only do so if the law allows them to. I think for the most part, all of them have been answered. So I'll start out by clarifying what exactly we're talking about when we say self-managed abortion. So a self-managed abortion refers to a non-clinical abortion or abortion that happens outside of the formal healthcare system and without the involvement of a medical professional. As you can see, it's an abortion that happens most commonly in someone's home, done in the privacy of their home, and usually they have the help of a friend, family member. Significant attention in the media is paid to self-managed abortion with pills. And this is understandable because abortion pills have been a game changer for safe abortion access all over the world, including in countries where abortion is criminalized, but people do use other methods. Self-managed abortion can include the use of pharmaceutical pills, traditional herbs, and plant-based medicine and other means to end a pregnancy. And these methods have been used for a very long time. Now, not every abortion with pills is a self-managed abortion. People can have abortions with pills from a clinic received in person or in the mail through telemedicine. And now pills will also be available via prescription from local pharmacies. And in these cases, it's not a self-managed abortion. It's what's called a medication abortion. And sometimes in terms of medication abortion, that's used interchangeably with abortion with SMA instead of the term abortion with pill. But medication abortion refers specifically to a type of clinical abortion distinct from a surgical abortion. And Becca, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Catherine. So I think coming out of that, a very common question that we get, and a question that we kind of touched on in the polls, if clinical abortion exists, why would someone choose to self-manage instead? And as part of that, we like to highlight what we call push and pull factors to illustrate that someone who self-manages is really navigating their own set of very complex experiences when deciding if, when, and how to manage their abortion care. There are reasons that may both push or pull people who can't carry a pregnancy to term to self-manage. And I'll refer to reasons as quote unquote push factors that tend to be barriers to clinical care. And I'll refer as pull factors, those that tend to be the conditions that attract someone and allow them to make decisions from a place of agency toward a self-managed abortion. And there's going to be overlap. Push and pull factors are often two sides of the same coin, but it's important to understand that people who choose to self-manage may make this decision from within their own agency, not solely because of the existence of external barriers. At this point, I think we're going to open up the chat a little bit because I would love to invite the audience to type in the chat what they might consider to be some pull factors for self-managed abortion. What are some reasons that you can think of why self-managed abortion would be someone's first and primary choice for ending a pregnancy, even if clinical care is an option for them? Yeah. Privacy, distrust in the health system, having experienced medical trauma, medical racism. Absolutely, all of those. Thank you. So yeah, I think you covered quite a few of these. A lot of the reasons why somebody may choose to self-manage: the increased privacy, being able to do it in their own home. It may just be more available, less hoops to jump through. Control, they get to control when it happens, where it happens, with who it happens. For a variety of safety concerns, it might be easier for them to avoid going to a clinic. Clinical abortions can be incredibly costly. That is a major driver of why people choose to self-manage as a primary option. Okay, so now on the other end of it, please type in the chat what you think are some push factors for self-managed abortion. What are some reasons why someone might choose self-managed abortion, even though they would have preferred a clinical abortion as their first and primary choice? Yeah, a lack of resources, where they are located plays a big role, right? Cost, that's one of those push and pull factors that exist across both. Abortion bans might be the only accessible alternative. State policy. I see a question mark around religion. Yeah, I mean, we can talk a little bit more about that, but certainly people's faith and what may be to them the right method can vary. But yeah, again, I think you named a lot of these. These are all the various barriers that can exist, and not a exclusive list between a pregnant person and clinical abortion care. The cost of the procedure, how far they might have to travel. There are what we call trap laws, those laws that say you have to wait up to 72 hours before you can get an abortion, that require somebody to travel and then stay there, which is not feasible for a lot of people. Maybe they're afraid of facing harassment. People protest outside of clinics. If you live in a small town and people see you going to an abortion clinic, that could be a problem. For people who are survivors of domestic or intimate partner violence, the ability to leave the home freely and access that kind of care might open them up to potential violence in the home as well. Thank you for participating in that little exercise. So we've talked through what self-managed abortion is, why somebody might choose to self-manage. At this point, you might be wondering how it's possible to self-manage abortion care beyond a clinical setting. And we're going to talk about pills, but I want to center traditional or cultural methods of self-managing first, just as an anti-racist practice, because Indigenous people, Black people, and people of color have seen our traditional healing practices both stigmatized and appropriated within white supremacist society. And it's important to acknowledge that while the advent of effective abortion pills is fairly recent in the history of abortion methods, there is a breadth of non-clinical abortion practices. These practices can follow along lines of cultural heritage and geography and hold deep historical context for many communities. It is important to acknowledge that there are long and varied histories of abortion care rooted in traditional practice or outside of formal medical institutions. Self-managed abortion is part of a larger spectrum of pregnancy-related care and reproductive care that one might choose to manage outside of a clinical setting. That includes things like all options pregnancy counseling, miscarriage management and support, menstrual regulation and relief, holistic gynecology, and pregnancy prevention practices. I'll pass it back to you, Catherine.
Okay, so to talk about abortion with pills, millions of people have had safe and effective abortions using the medications mifepristone and misoprostol. Misoprostol on its own is slightly less effective, but can also be safely used, especially where mifepristone is unavailable. During a self-managed abortion with pills, people generally take the medications and experience their abortions without the supervision of a healthcare provider. Now, an abortion with pills may also take place via telemedicine in the states that do not prohibit telemedicine abortion, but telemedicine abortion, whether pills are provided in person or by mail, is not a self-managed abortion. Healthcare provider, even if the experience of the abortion takes place at the home. So the key and the distinction really is, or what makes a self-managed abortion is not having the assistance or the guidance of a healthcare provider. I made the distinction about the term medication abortion being incorrectly used interchangeably with self-managed abortion or treated as being synonymous with abortion pills. I want to reiterate that medication abortion refers specifically to pills given by a licensed provider, whether in person or by mail. And it's a distinction that we have to make to avoid confusing people about the legal risk involved with self-managing, which are quite different from when pills are provided by a medical professional. Even when the pills are used the same way in both instances, medications that are proven effective and medically safe. So the main concern today for people who self-manage is legal risk. And before we get into criminalization, we're going to back up a little bit and define some terms. So this presentation is about self-managed abortion in the law, and we'll be talking about how it is criminalized. And when we use the term criminalization, it's to make an activity a crime or treat someone as a criminal. Abortion is a human right, and criminalization of abortion is happening against the backdrop of mass criminalization and race and class targeted violence by the state against its own communities within a landscape of hyper-policing or of targeted individuals and communities, excessive and fatal use of force in these encounters, often with impunity, harassment, civil asset forfeiture, fines, detention, incarceration, and monitoring and surveillance. Against a backdrop of calls to police for normal behavior, like men sitting in a Starbucks or walking a dog in a park, a student napping in their dorm room, families barbecuing in parks, teenagers having a pool party in their neighborhood, the criminalization of self-managed abortion is happening in a context where police, prosecutors, and legal officials have extraordinary power to make discretionary decisions about people's activities, and in part or wholly based on their identities. Next slide. So reproductive justice, this is why we advocate for a reproductive justice framework. It allows us to draw connections between lived experiences and the work we're here to do. I know that many of you here are advocates or maybe hoping to be advocates, and the reproductive justice framework has been an important lodestar of our movement in the US. If you're familiar, reproductive justice isn't a sophisticated, or if you're unfamiliar, I'm sorry, it's not a sophisticated way of saying reproductive rights. The term was coined in the year of the first International Conference on Population and Development by Black women activists, organizers, and advocates in the US. And it's rooted in the intersectional lived experiences of race, gender, so on. And it calls for us to think beyond simply the constitutional right to abortion, which, while has been hard fought, has not lived up to the promise of equitable access. and now no longer exists. So reproductive justice is a framework based in human rights as opposed to constitutional rights. Reproductive justice also names clearly the right to have children, to not have children, and to create families in safe and healthy environments free from violence. So here in Killing the Black Body, Race, Reproduction, and the Meaning of Liberty, legal scholar Dorothy Roberts explores the history of reproductive control in the US. And she writes, first, we need to adopt a positive view of liberty. Second, the law must recognize the connection between the right to liberty and racial equality. The traditional concept of liberty makes the false presumption that the right to choose is contained entirely within the individual and not circumscribed by the material conditions of the individual's life. And we include this quote because it sums up what we're trying to put into action and how this part of a reproductive justice framework, we're building an understanding of how laws and policies can work together to determine the material conditions of someone's life in the context of access to abortion care. Now we're going to look at some trends in the law. Throughout US history, people who had abortions, even before Roe v. Wade, were rarely criminalized by law or pursued for criminal sanctions for having had an abortion or ended their own pregnancies. To this day, only a small handful of states actually make it a crime for a person to end their own pregnancy. So currently, only 2 states, Nevada and South Carolina, have explicit prohibitions against self-managed abortions. Idaho is in yellow because it bans, it's SMA, so I'm going to refer to self-managed abortion as SMA from time to time, but Idaho is in yellow because its SMA ban has been found unconstitutional but has not been repealed. And the states in green are states that just within the past few years repealed their self-managed abortion bans. New York is actually one of those states. All the other states in gray do not prohibit self-managed abortion.
I'm sorry.
No.
So if we switch to the second map, you'll see these are all the red states. You'll see these are states that between 2000 and 2020, there was a criminal investigation or arrest for an alleged self-managed abortion that happened in those states, which if we flip between the 2 maps, you'll see there's a difference, right? Most states do not make self-managed abortion illegal. A lot of states, somebody has been criminalized for it. So a pretty clear mismatch. So then I think a natural question that comes out of this is, what are people being investigated for? And what we've seen with SMA is that prosecutors will really try everything and the kitchen sink to see what sticks when they want to punish somebody. That's true in general about our legal system, but also true specifically with self-managed abortion. This is just a quick click through of different types of laws that have been used against people for self-managing. They're what we call criminal abortion or provider-only laws that say only doctors or certain other licensed medical professionals can perform an abortion. If you fall outside of that and you perform an abortion, including on yourself, that can be considered what's called a criminal abortion. So some people who self-manage have been criminalized under these laws, even though, again, these laws were not created to target people who self-manage. They were created to target people who would present themselves as doctors and perform procedures unsafely. There are also laws called fetal harm. They could be called fetal victim laws, depending on the state, that were really created to protect pregnant people from harm, and instead they have been used against people who self-manage. Some of these laws include specific language that exempts the pregnant person from prosecution. Most of them do not, and that leaves prosecutors wiggle room to use them against pregnant people. This is an exclusive list of laws that have been used. Prescription drug laws have also been used against people who self-manage. In some cases, homicide charges have been brought, and even really outdated laws that we don't see used very commonly anymore, like concealment of a birth and abuse of a corpse, are kind of revived by prosecutors to go after people suspected of self-managing. So then what does that all mean? fundamentally, we understand that what the law actually says is a very small part of criminalization. Criminalization of self-managed abortion, like all forms of criminalization in the United States, affects some people more than others because of their identities, their circumstances, and where they live. For example, a low-income person of color who self-manages an abortion later in their pregnancy and then seeks medical care may be more likely to be reported to law enforcement. Not just because somebody in the hospital thought it was illegal for them to end their own pregnancy, even if it was not. The person who self-managed may also happen to fall into a category of patients who regularly experiences bias and distrust from the healthcare system. They may be the same person whose community is already more heavily policed and incarcerated. We really break down risk factors when it comes to SMA criminalization into these three main buckets. Again, non-exhaustive. The first bucket of factors is what we call personal or discriminatory factors. If somebody is living in poverty, they're a person of color, we know they face disproportionate risk of criminalization. There are also discretionary factors. What does the law say exactly where somebody lives? Are they living in one of those two states that explicitly bans self-managed abortion? What is the prosecutor in their situation particularly motivated to do? What is their proximity to law enforcement or people we consider law enforcement adjacent, like social workers who might report them or might investigate them for what they suspect might have happened? And then the third bucket is circumstantial factors. This is kind of the catch-all of everything else. If there is physical evidence that is found and then starts a police investigation, if somebody else knows about a self-managed abortion, feels a particular way about it, wants to report it to police, that's going to kickstart an investigation. And we'll talk briefly about one case that happened in New York. And standard disclaimer here, this is a reminder that the person in this case is more than just a number or a story or a case study. She is a real person. Her life was really upended by self-managed abortion criminalization and continues to be upended today. So in 2011, a 20-year-old New York woman named Yerbeli Almonte, who was an immigrant, was charged with first-degree self-abortion for allegedly drinking an herbal tea to terminate her pregnancy. The charges were dropped, but not before her name and the charges were widely publicized in the media. New York, like we said earlier, did repeal its criminal self-abortion law in 2019. In several such cases, we see a similar outcome. The charges are dropped, but even if somebody is not charged, the consequences of criminalization follows them, being investigated, being reported in the media. All of that can mean that person loses their job. If they have children, they may lose custody of their children. They may get kicked out of school. They may be harassed. They may be subject to violence and a stigma and discrimination and much, much more coming out of that. And just, you know, I want to stress that it's not my goal to scare people or inflate risk when it comes to criminalization. The reality is we learn about self-managed abortion primarily when people come to the attention of law enforcement. And so those are the stories we hear. Those are the numbers that most often we see. But I am not just quite certain. I know for sure that many, many people successfully self-manage without ever garnering any media attention. They do it in complete privacy. Those are the stories we don't hear. And so all we get is a very skewed picture of risk. And I don't want me talking about criminalization to be taken as that full picture. Facing legal risk is not a certainty. It's not a yes, no. It's a spectrum. And it's based on a wide variety of those factors that I talked about earlier. My purpose, just to provide context and information as one piece of that puzzle. Oh, and we're doing our wrap up of resources. So, you know, if you want a quick way to get involved, we do have a quick call to action here. We have a SMA decriminalization petition we have been circulating. We have the link there. We can also share the link after this presentation, but please do sign on, help us call political leaders to move toward decrim. And I will hand it back to Catherine.
I want to wrap up my piece by sharing some resources at If When How. We do have a legal helpline, and when people contact the helpline, they can leave a secure message if people have a question about their rights and their legal rights or the risk of a self-managed abortion. We provide legal information. If they need more specific advice, we provide confidential legal advice. And if people are looking for clinic-based resources or funds to pay for an abortion, we can direct them to clinics and funds in their specific state. If people are experiencing reproductive coercion or intimate partner violence, we provide referrals and resources as well. And if someone who had a self-managed abortion is threatened with criminal investigation or has been arrested even or served a warrant, we can provide representation, or if they already have a lawyer, we offer co-counseling or consultation with their lawyer as well. And we want you to know about this resource so that you can share it widely. We also do have language interpretation available. On the helpline site, you can find a separate form for providers and other advocates to request technical assistance or training around self-managed abortion, criminalization, among a number of other topics as well. And we do have a resource for young people who need help accessing abortion. That's our Judicial Bypass Wiki. We also have the Repro Legal Defense Fund, which covers bail, legal fees, and more for people who are targeted by police or prosecutors for ending their own pregnancy or experiencing pregnancy loss, just to make sure that they can mount strong defenses. So what can you all do? The First Amendment protects all of our rights to talk about abortion, including self-managed abortion. And talking about it is a fundamental part of destigmatizing it. And destigmatizing it is fundamental to decriminalizing it. We want to encourage people to talk about self-managed abortion and share information and resources. And that's all risk-free that you can all do, unless you veer into giving legal or medical advice without a license to do so. Here is some examples.
Yeah, so just, what's a quick way of determining whether I might be going into the realm of giving medical or legal advice when I don't want to do that? If you're providing general information, here's what SMA is, here's what the pills involved are, here's what the World Health Organization says about self-managed abortion. That's just providing top-level information anybody can Google and look up. That's fine. The moment you know you're going into potential danger zone of giving advice is when you're getting really specific about somebody's situation. Oh, in your case, here's what I would do. And step one, you should go here, and then you should do this. By the time you're there, you've veered into giving advice. And that's something that it happens. It's very easy to slip into giving advice when you have information to share, but you want to avoid getting that granular with anybody. But here's some things we all can do. And like Catherine mentioned, just talking about it is such an important part of destigmatizing. You can learn more about why people make the decision to self-manage and validate people's experiences, offer support, and help them plan for whatever they might need post-abortion. And as always, kind of keep medical information private that is shared with you as well. We have contact information. You don't need to write any of this down. I'm happy to share this with Candace to get this back out to all of you. We do have pro bono opportunities for attorneys. We always need people who are interested in doing criminal defense for people who are criminalized in relation to accessing abortion. We're also interested in attorneys who want to help young people access abortion. And we're closing out for questions.
Awesome. And please put questions in the Q&A function if you have them. I have 3 for you both. To start, the first one is from Juliana Gonin. I assume Idaho's SMA ban was struck down pre-Dobbs. Since it hasn't been repealed, could it come back to life and be used now?
Sorry, what state was this?
Idaho.
Yeah, so Idaho is an interesting case where we think it's very unlikely for the ban to be used successfully against somebody just because the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals did say it's unconstitutional. But again, if it exists, we know prosecutors will try it. They haven't since it was found unconstitutional, but it is kind of one of our priorities to get them to completely wipe that law off the books.
All right, the next question is from an anonymous attendee. So in what ways can people get Miffy and Miso without a prescription or without contacting a healthcare provider?
So there are sites that make it available for people to purchase. Yeah, people just go online, and there are a couple different websites where people usually purchase them from. And yeah, there are also dedicated groups that have like work on making this accessible for people without prescriptions.
Can I ask a follow-up question of how do you know which sites are legitimate and which ones aren't? Because I'm sure there's a lot of sites out there that whose goal is not to actually get you the medication that you're seeking.
Yeah, this is a common problem. Well, I don't want to say common, but it's something that we know happened, especially after Dobbs came down. A lot of people trying to kind of monetize the situation. Plan C is a very great resource. We share it on our website. They basically did a long-term study of all the various pill providers and rating like whether the pills they received were what they purported to be.
Great. And the next question, also from Juliana Gonin. So currently, 2 states criminalize SMA explicitly, and I think states with abortion bans only target providers. Do we expect to see more abortion bans criminalizing the pregnant person, whether for SMA or for obtaining a surgical procedure? So I guess the shift from provider criminalization to pregnant person criminalization.
Yeah, currently we haven't seen any targeted efforts to change the law to reach pregnant people. But I don't know if you've all been following the news recently. The Alabama DA recently said he would try to find ways of using their chemical endangerment law to go after pregnant people who self-manage. He quickly walked those back and said he never said that. But that is concern. I think our main area of concern is always with prosecutors who don't know the law or don't care about the law. And again, you know, they don't need something official to go after somebody if they want to. So, but no specific targeted laws against the pregnant person themselves.
And the next question, do the sites that offer Miso online without a prescription mail to states with abortion bans?
They do. A lot of sites also, some people call in often about, you know, whether there's any legal risk associated with getting those pills delivered to their state. And our number one thing is that the only way to completely avoid legal risk is traveling to a state where abortion is being legally provided, getting, you know, the pills there and taking them there. But for some people, that's not possible. And these sites do mail those pills directly to your home.
Great. And a facilitator question. I'm wondering, how can you be really clear with folks around the difference between SMA and telemedicine? And I feel like it's just all become this one big jumble, similar to kind of what reproductive justice goes through. So how do you all at If When How just like clearly distinguish, you know, someone calling you up and saying one thing and you know that they mean another? Like, how do you guys navigate this on a day-to-day basis?
A lot of people do call in about like a self-managed abortion, and you can, based on the questions, you can see that there is confusion around that. I think the clearest way is to explain that with a self-managed abortion, it means that you have no assistance from a healthcare provider, whereas that's the main difference. So just you know, your own methods or taking the pill on your own, if you were to order from Plan C and not having a prescription, if you don't have a prescription, then it's considered a self-managed abortion.
All right. Do folks have any other questions? If so, please feel free to type them into the Q&A function. And as we wait for other questions, so what do you all see as the future of SMA? I mean, we're in this very interesting moment where so many different possibilities it could happen. What do you all see? Do you see this as becoming the most common way of accessing abortion? Do you see it becoming so criminalized that people are afraid to do it? Like, what do you guys see at If When How?
I think just in this political and legal moment, it's so hard to predict. So what we always say is we know COVID, we know jobs, all of these things meant more people were looking into self-managing. It meant more people actually were self-managing. And, decriminalization, when, how that will be possible is so unclear that we think people will be at legal risk for years to come, just matching the drive in interest between self-managed abortion. But again, people will continue to do that regardless of the law. People have always done that. So, all we can do in the interim is, provide support however we can and work toward destigmatizing in the hopes that one day, maybe within our lifetimes, this will be a completely moot issue.
Awesome. So one more question. So any advice for social workers caught in a legal limbo working with clients who are trying to access abortions while trying not to provide medical advice? And I would say for social workers and for lawyers. So when can you take your legal hat off, or when can you take your law student hat off and be the friend? Like, how do you actually navigate that?
Yeah, again, there is stuff I feel very comfortable saying. When people have questions, they're like, what is self-managed abortion? I'm happy to explain what that means. How do people self-manage? Oh, they do it with pills, misoprostol and mifepristone. And here's how the pills work. You can read all of these things. There's a lot of very public resources that walk people through how to get pills, how to use pills. And I say, there could be legal risk. You might want to, when I'm not at work, I say you might want to call into our helpline and ask Catherine or one of our other amazing attorneys on the helpline what that risk may mean to you. Here, read what the World Health Organization says. These pills are safe, they're effective. The World Health Organization recommends self-managing as part of holistic care, not just as a last resort option. I'm perfectly happy saying all of that. And, I'm going to provide all this information, and the person I'm talking to is going to make the best decision for them. And at no point am I like, oh my God, you should self-manage. Here, go to this website, right? Again, very hard line to walk when you're talking to a friend, but, what you say might put you at risk, but it might also put the person you're talking to at risk if you're not careful about walking that line. So.
Yeah, I'm often thinking back to how you started your presentation on the traditional remedies of self-managing abortion, mixing it together with the modern day technologies that we have. And so I'm wondering if when I'll talk about, instead of just self-managed, where it's, a private singular act, maybe with just yourself, what about community management and self-managing with abortion pills with the presence of your community or your family or your friends? Have you all talked about what that looks like even legally? Like if it's criminalized in a state and you're with someone who is self-managing, do you take on legal risk? Just so how does the community management of abortion care work?
I think Catherine had something to add to the last question. Catherine, if you wanted to pop back in before we get into this one.
I did, but I actually lost it. So if it comes back, I'll pop back in.
That's okay. Yeah, I can take first stab at this and I'll kick it to Catherine. We do, one thing we stress is, we don't want the word self-managed to be misleading. In the slides that Catherine covered, other people are often involved, a trusted family member, a partner, a community provider. We know doulas are very active in providing emotional and post-care support to people who self-manage. Yeah, we acknowledge that is entirely possible. But of course, when we talk about criminalization, that is something that touches the people who we call helpers, right? People who may be providing pills, people who may be providing instructions. We do talk to those people. They are also at risk. Especially this is like a really unknown time with, like Texas and SB 8 and bounty hunting laws. Yeah, there is risk there, and people, it is really unclear what it means to be somebody who is providing. And we certainly don't want to chill anybody out of providing that support, because that's important and necessary. So we talk to them about risk as a spectrum in the same way that, we talk to people who are directly self-managing about risk as a spectrum.
And what I was going to mention earlier, I think a good way to remember that distinction between offering information versus advice is just, if it's something that people can look up on a trusted site, then, go for it, give them that information, let them know you can go to this resource for that. But when it's specific details about your specific situation and your specific state, then I'd err on the side of caution.
Awesome. Yes, when in doubt, refer out. Call the legal helpline number, an amazing resource where you can send folks to call if, when, how to ask them their specific questions. Any other questions from anyone before I give the floor for last words and thoughts to Rebecca and Catherine? Awesome. Well, hearing none. Oh wait, I see a cue. I see a cue. How does it concern human rights? Can someone say more about that question? Or what they're meaning in specific? I guess maybe the question of what is the connection of SMA to human rights?
Yeah, we operate from the perspective that abortion access is a human right. Other countries agree with that. International legal theorists agree with that. And as part of that, self-managed abortion is part of that spectrum of care. And again, I think more like international entities are backing that as well, including, like I said, the World Health Organization. And when we make legal arguments here in the United States pushing for decrim, we are arguing from a human rights perspective. But again, to what extent has US law reflected human rights? That is the biggest question and the biggest barrier that we face right now.
Okay, great. You answered their question. All right, I want to just give it to you both to have last words, but I just want to first thank you both so much for being here and for really just breaking it down for us around what actually is self-managed abortion. What does criminalization actually mean? And with that, I want to thank you. I want to thank all of our co-sponsors, and I want to give you the last word before we close this thing out.
Yeah, just a quick plug. If you're a lawyer or you're a law student and you're interested in connecting with us in our work, we do have a reproductive justice lawyers network. I can also provide that info in the follow-up, but yeah, if you want to be in community with the other lawyers and law students in our network, that is the #1 go-to.
I am in that network, so please come join me. And Catherine, anything you want to share with folks before we close it out?
Just thank you all for having us, and it's really important to be a part of these conversations. The information that I know sometimes it's like, well, I'm in New York, it doesn't really concern me as much, but you'd be surprised how far like the information that you have now can reach. So just keep having these conversations and trying to relay that information to others as much as possible.
Awesome. And we will, if you send resources to me, I will make sure that attendees get them. And with that, we want to just thank you all for joining in for this conversation on SMA and Criminalization 101, and give a virtual round of applause to Catherine and Rebecca and my colleague Lilia for all of the amazing organizing that she has done behind the scenes. And with that, I want to just thank you and have a great Tuesday, everyone.
Thank you.